Hey, babe, and anybody else watching, and welcome back to A Life Together. So first off, had a bit of a temperature, so forgive me if I'm hacking and acting weird, or if I pass out, maintain on your own. Today we are going through 2 Chronicles 14, 15, 16, and 17. And we're going to be picking up where we left off, which was with Rehoboam, the splitting of Israel, and then Abijah, and he was the king of Judah. So today we're going to be following two more kings of Judah. First, Asa, and there's a good amount of content there with Asa, and then also Jehoshaphat. So that's going to carry us just with those two kings through chapter 17. So 14, 15, 16, and 17 today. Excuse me. So chapter 14. And Abijah rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. Asa, his son, succeeded him as king, and in his days the country was at peace for 10 years. Asa did what was good and right in the eyes of the Lord his God. He removed the foreign altars and the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. He commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, and to obey his laws and commands. He removed the high places and incense altars in every town in Judah, and the kingdom was at peace under him. He built up the fortified cities of Judah, since the land was at peace. No one was at war with him during those years, for the Lord gave him rest. Let us build up these towns, he said to Judah, and put up walls around them, with towers, gates, and bars. The land is still ours, because we have sought the Lord our God. We sought him, and he has given us rest on every side. So they built and prospered. Asa had an army of 300,000 men from Judah, equipped with large shields and with spears, and 280,000 from Benjamin, armed with small shields and with bows. All these were brave fighting men. Zerah, the Cushite, marched out against them with a vast army and 300 chariots, and came as far as Marashah. Asa went down to meet him, and they took up battle positions at the valley of Zarephath, near Marashah. Then Asa called to the Lord his God and said, Lord, there is no one like you to help the powerless against the mighty. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rely on you, and in your name we have come against this vast army. O Lord, you are our God. Do not let man prevail against you. The Lord struck down the Cushites before Asa and Judah. The Cushites fled, and Asa and his army pursued them as far as Gerar. Such a great number of Cushites fell that they could not recover, and they were crushed before the Lord and his forces. The men of Judah carried off a large amount of plunder. They destroyed all the villages around Gerar, for the terror of the Lord had fallen upon them. They plundered all these villages, since there was much booty there. They also attacked the camps of the herdsmen and carried off droves of sheep and goats and camels. Then they returned to Jerusalem. Chapter 15. The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Oded. He went out to meet Asa and said to him, Listen to me, Asa, and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will forsake you. For a long time Israel was without the true God, without a priest to teach, and without the law. But in their distress they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, and he was found by them. In those days it was not safe to travel about, for all the inhabitants of the land were in great turmoil. One nation was being crushed by another, and one city by another, because God was troubling them with every kind of distress. But as for you, be strong, and do not give up, for your work will be rewarded. When Asa heard these words and the prophecy of Azariah, son of Oded the prophet, he took courage. He removed the He removed the detestable idols from the whole land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the towns he had captured in the hills of Ephraim. He repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the portico of the Lord's temple. Then he assembled all Judah and Benjamin, and the people from Ephraim, Manasseh, and Simeon who had settled among them, for large numbers had come over to him from Israel when they saw that the Lord his God was with him. Excuse me. They assembled at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year of Asa's reign. At that time they sacrificed to the Lord 700 head of cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder they had brought back. They entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their fathers, with all their heart and soul. All who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. They took an oath to the Lord with loud acclamation, with shouting, and with trumpets and horns. All Judah rejoiced about the oath, because they had sworn it wholeheartedly. They sought God eagerly, and he was found by them. So the Lord gave them rest on every side. King Asa also deported his grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother, because she had made a repulsive Asherah pole. Asa cut the pole down, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Although he did not remove the high places from Israel, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his life. He brought he brought into the temple of God the silver and gold and the articles that he and his father had dedicated. There was no more war until the 35th year of Asa's reign. Chapter 16. In the 36th year of Asa's reign, Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and fortified Ramah to prevent anyone from leaving or entering the territory of Asa, king of Judah. Asa then took the silver and gold out of the treasuries of the Lord's temple and of his own palace and sent it to Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, who was ruling in Damascus. "Let there be a treaty between me and you," he said, "as there was between my father and your father. See, I am sending you silver and gold. Now break your treaty with Baasha, king of Israel, so he will withdraw from me." Ben-Hadad agreed with King Asa and sent the commanders of his forces against some of the towns of Israel. They conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel-Maim, and all the store cities of Naphtali. When Baasha heard this, he stopped building Ramah and abandoned his work. Then King Asa brought all the men of Judah, and they carried away from Ramah the stones and timber Baasha had been using. With them, he built up Geba and Mizpah. At that time, Hanani, the seer, came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, "Because you relied on the king of Aram and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped from your hand. Were not the Cushites, the Libyans, a mighty army with great numbers of chariots and horsemen? Yet when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them from into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. You have done a foolish thing, and from now on you will be at war." Asa was angry with the seer because of this. He was so enraged that he put him in prison. At the same time, Asa brutally oppressed some of the people. The events of Asa's reign, from beginning to end, are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. In the 39th year of his reign, Asa was afflicted with a disease in his feet. Though his disease was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from physicians. Then, in the 41st year of his reign, Asa died and rested with his fathers. They buried him in the tomb that they had cut out for him in the city of David. They laid him on a bier covered with spices and very splendid perfumes, and they made a huge fire in his honor. Excuse me. And chapter 17. Jehoshaphat, his son, succeeded him as king and strengthened himself against Israel. He stationed troops in all the fortified cities of Judah and put garrisons in Judah and in the towns of Ephraim that his father Asa had captured. The Lord was with Jehoshaphat because, in his early years, he walked in the ways of his father David had followed. He did not consult the Baals, but sought the God of his father and followed his commands rather than the practices of Israel. The Lord established the kingdom under his control, and all Judah brought gifts to Jehoshaphat so that he had great wealth and honor. His heart was devoted to the ways of the Lord. Furthermore, he removed the high places and the Asherah poles from Judah. In the 3rd year of his reign, he sent his officials Ben-Hail, Obadiah, Zechariah, Nethaneel, and Micaiah to teach in the towns of Judah. With them were certain Levites, Shemaiah, Nethaniah, Zabadiah, Asahel, Shemarioth, Jehohanathan, Adonijah, Tobijah, and Tob-Adonijah, and the priests Elishama and Jeroham. They taught throughout Judah, taking with them the book of the law of the Lord. They went around to all the towns of Judah and taught the people. The fear of the Lord fell upon the kingdoms of the land surrounding Judah, so that they did not make war with Jehoshaphat. Some Philistines brought Jehoshaphat gifts as silver and tribute, and the Arabs brought him flocks, 7,700 rams and 7,700 goats. Jehoshaphat became more and more powerful. He built up forts and store cities in Judah, and he had large supplies in the towns of Judah. He also kept experienced fighting men in Jerusalem. Their enrollment by families was as follows. From Judah, commanders of units of 1,000. Adnah, the commander, with 300,000 fighting men. Next, Jehohanan, the commander, with 280,000. Next, Amasai, son of Zikri, who volunteered himself for the service of the Lord, with 200,000. From Benjamin, Eliada, a valiant soldier, with 200,000 men armed with bows and shields. Next, Jehozabad, with 180,000 men armed for battle. These were the men who served the king, besides those he stationed in the fortified cities throughout Judah. So looking at that, I love that we see Jehoshaphat as being very faithful. I think that's awesome. But what interests me is Asa and not being able to run the race, or maybe he ran the race. I mean, maybe that's not fair to him. It sounds like he ran the race, but he didn't finish well. I mean, looking at that, we see through the years of his reign, I think it was 36 years of peace, not because he didn't have people coming against him. He absolutely did, but he relied on the Lord as God, and therefore God took care of them. But it seems in that 30 whatever year span that he got complacent. I mean, we see that in 16:7. 16:7, at that time, Hananiah the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you relied on the king of Aram and not on the Lord your God, the army of the king of Aram has escaped your hand. That was something God was prepared to deliver into Asa's hand, and Asa missed it. 16:12 has kind of that part of his turning point after he gets sick and he's inflicted with that disease. 12 says, in the 39th year of his reign, Asa was inflicted with a disease in his feet. Though his disease was severe, even in his illness, he did not seek help from the Lord, but only from the physicians. This note here says, King Asa suffered from a serious foot disease, which some scholars think was dropsy. The Bible criticizes his consultations with physicians because in those days, physicians were pagan healers who used rituals that conflicted with the law of God. So there are two things that I thought were interesting there. Number one is kind of brings up that idea of God versus science. Oh, this is ridiculous. Why isn't, it's just him pursuing science, right? Well, no, in this case, that's not what it is. That's number one. And then that whole God versus science thing. There's no contention there. And I think it's important for us to remember that there's no contention between God and science at all. There's so much that we don't understand that science can't yet prove, and yet feels, it feels like science is slowly catching up to the Bible. And it's really, there's a lot of examples of that. Obviously from Noah and the waters of the deep coming out of the earth, and they're now finding these giant, just massive reservoirs of water. And it's like, well, that's pretty interesting. But there are so many things like that where we have to remember that God is the standard. He's the one that created science. And just because we don't always understand it doesn't mean that it's a reason to throw up our hands and freak out. People obviously always complain about young earth interpretations of Genesis, or young earth interpretations of how old the world is. And looking at that, if we're looking at the biblical account of Adam, that very first day that God created Adam, he created him with age. He immediately created him with age. And that is nothing for God to be able to transcend that. So it would say that Adam was, I'm making up a number here, 35 instead of less than a day old. Remembering back to Jesus' first miracle, the water into wine, that doesn't just happen, right? Someone's responsible. But also, wine is an aged substance, and Jesus created it like that. So we have to remember who created science. Through Jesus, all things were created. So worth remembering, worth praying about. So let's do that. My God, I thank you for all that you have done, all that you have created, all that you are. God, you are so great. And help us to recognize that when we don't understand how you work, help us to have faith, God. Help us not to just throw up our hands and give up and say, well, it must be all wrong just because we don't understand. Lord, you have given us all that we need to understand. And that's a lot. God, the evidence of you and your creation is all over the place. And we thank you so, so much for it. We thank you infinitely more for your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Well, that is about all I have for you today. As always, know I appreciate you. Wife, appreciate you tons. And I will plan on seeing you tomorrow. Have a good one.